Comenzamos la sesión final, bueno, la penúltima sesión de hoy, because we have a social activity game for those who want to participate afterwards. I'm not going to take that much time, but we thought we would talk a little bit about a few things in terms of integrating some of the things we've been hearing about. By the way, I thought the panels were very interesting. I want to thank the panel coordinators and also all the panelists and everyone who participated asking questions. I think it was a very interesting format for us to work with, and very good ideas came out of it. So thank you, everybody. So I've been sort of taking some notes as things were, as the panels were evolving, and I hope that you'll see some of the things that you've been raising reflected in some of these slides. So basically, we wanted to talk a little bit about next steps for Salurval in terms of team coordination, research and dissemination and policy translation, focusing mostly on the next year, although there will be a few things that might be more long-term. We are in the 4th year of our project, right, Claire?
Yes.
Yes. We have one more year. We already were able to extend by 6 months. So so we have a little bit more time. Perhaps we will be able to get an additional extension where hopefully we'll be, updating you when we know more about that. And then of course we have the Making the Impossible Possible award. So stay tuned for that. So in terms of team coordination and communication, and I look forward to everyone's input on this. I know this is not the easiest way to participate, but please do raise your hand or chat or just speak up first, actually. I think, a challenge for us is to continue to maximize remote engagement as much as possible. And, we are all engaging remotely with many things, so this is hard, but I think the fact that we've had nearly 100 people join in for these 2 days so far is a testament to the fact that people want to be connected, so that's great. We have also done a few things, as we've mentioned before. We've added 2 extra team meetings in October and November where we will be doing some of the core and data updates that we were usually doing as part of the in-person meeting, but we thought it was too much to try to do all that remotely this week. And those things are important because you'll hear about data and that may give you ideas and help move things forward. Continue to support and engage in the core meetings. The working groups, I think, my impression is that they've gone very well. Mortality and survey, one question in my mind is whether, right now it's been limited to the leads of those papers that we have identified, but of course, there may be other people who may benefit from hearing the conversations in those working groups, even if you do not have a paper that you're working on right now. And so I think maybe that's something we could think about. I'll be interested in what all of you think, but there might be ways that we can expand membership, because some of the things that come up in paper reviews are common, and I think it might be interesting for others to be able to join these working groups. Another thing we've talked about is, as we are analyzing more data, do we want to create some sort of statistical data analyst troubleshooting team to support local analysts on technical issues? So some of these things are discussed in the working groups, but there may be more technical things that could benefit from having a little team that doesn't have to meet very often, but that can just touch base and support some analyses. And then the other thing we talked about in terms of team coordination is virtual training opportunities. And we've had these in-person workshops at the meetings before, which were very well attended and well received. So what's the best way to continue that in the remote setting? A few ideas came up today, given our conversation around longitudinal and natural experiment evaluations, to perhaps develop some training opportunities in those areas. And then, you know, are there other activities that you can think of to sustain team engagement and productivity in the context of this remote scenario that we have? And perhaps, you know, we should tentatively plan a date and location for our next in-person meeting. I don't know, it just occurred to me that perhaps, you know, we can start thinking about that for next year. You know, we'll see whether that can happen. We're not sure when, so I don't know, maybe it's too soon to do that, but, you know, maybe in the next few months, we'll have a better sense of that. So I don't know if anyone, I'd like to stop for a few minutes here and see if anyone has any other ideas or any reactions to this, or any questions. Does this seem okay?
And one thing I want to add, for the mortality group, we started having other members who are not.
Oh, good. Okay.
We are expanding, and to everyone, you're welcome to join our group if you're interested in mortality.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the same for the survey. You know,
Okay.
I don't know, tomorrow we will have a small meeting, and I was planning to expand the invitation, but it's open to anybody who would want to join.
Okay.
It's
Great.
on the Google Calendar of the Salurval, and yeah, we welcome all of them. And with respect to the other point, Anna, about the create analyst troubleshooting team, I think it's a great idea, and maybe something we could think about, like an office hour type of thing, that, you know, once a month. Being, I certainly agree that during the working groups, we often would address some of those issues, and then also by email. But I think having a set time per month that just, you know, an analyst is available to answer questions, that would be great. At this point, you know, I think that we're gonna see, there are a lot of papers in the pipeline. I think it would be very useful to have that.
Great.
Resource.
I think, yes, thank you, Mariana. I think Daniel had raised his hand.
Anna, just briefly, thank you for this summary. I agree with what you've highlighted here. I would probably separate the longitudinal from the natural experiment training, just because they are pretty comprehensive, each of them separately. And I think both are certainly needed for very different reasons, but that's going to be magnified. And I agree with your idea and Mariana's comment on the office hours. My guess is that once a month may be too infrequent, but given the volume of manuscripts, but we could always expand or contract based on demand. So that's fine.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes. Did someone speak?
Yes. Hi, Kevin here.
Hi, Kevin. Yeah.
I was thinking also that maybe we can have also a repository for code, because sometimes it's useful to see the code for different countries, because the same indices and the same thing that we're calculating. So maybe to have like a GitHub or something similar. I know that here in the UHC, we were testing something similar, but I don't know if we can escalate something as a Salurval to share code.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Kevin. I think there is a plan where manuscripts that are approved have to send in their code. But I don't know that we've fully implemented that, but I think that's a great idea. Claire, I'm desperately looking for paper here and I can't find any paper. Are you taking notes on this, or is something
well, it's being recorded and I will be writing up a report. So
okay.
It's all being captured.
Okay. I opened up everything around me, but there's not a single piece of paper. So,
Yeah, so this is Carrie. So Kevin, I do agree with you. And like I said, we've been working on kind of a template of this in UHC that we do need to expand once we get it kind of up and running, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. So it is in the plans.
okay, any other thoughts on this?
I desperately don't want to add any task to my tasks, but I really don't. But
You're going to do it anyway.
but I'm wondering, same thing with the analyst, not necessarily the analyst or the office hours, but I'm thinking that because I've done this a lot and I'm doing this anyway, with things with figures or stuff like that, where graphs and figures, that that's a big part of any paper, and I think
Yeah.
it would be helpful to have some sort of support group, ideas group. Maybe this could be like a 30 minutes once a month or once every other month, where people present a figure of a paper and they get feedback. I've done this on my course, where people present their figures and they get feedback. And I know they do this during research in progress, but it's never. No one ever says, "Oh, I think that figure should be the other way." People talk only about the content.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if this is something we could organize a group that
Yeah, I think we could.
a meeting recurring. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so kind of figure troubleshooting or figure idea, visualization, troubleshooting kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that's great too, because I think that comes up in the survey working group a lot, is how do we best display this for manuscripts?
Okay.
The only thing I see with this kind of groups is that I think it should be something that should be a support and not another obligation you put in your agenda, because otherwise, so the idea will be more like a consultation, or right? Because if not, if you're trying to follow a cohort that the same people trying to meet it will be more complicated, and I think it will be overload the time that we have.
Yeah, it could be more like an office hours kind of thing, right? Just a time where people could come in. So no preparation would be necessary. It's not a preparation. Someone comes in and there's an opportunity to get feedback on something, right?
And perhaps it could be good that it's a fixed moment, so a fixed day on a fixed time during the day, because that way you are always having count that you can count with that time. If it's always varying, I think it's more difficult to adapt to.
Thanks. And no doodle post scheduling or anything, just a time. Yeah. Okay.
A Zoom address is the doorknob.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Any other thoughts?
And I read a comment, I don't know who said that, but Rosanna? Yeah, Rosanna said more virtual trainings, and I think that's a great idea. We did a multi-level in person, but there's the DAG one that was done, that there's this comment about doing the causal inference thing. I think continuing to do that will be great.
Yeah. Yeah, and we should also take advantage of, taping the trainings, right? So that then people can listen to them at other times, so that we don't have to be repeating, for some of the multi-level stuff, for example, it can be people can listen to it, and then there can be a discussion about it. So that's also less intense, less work, and people can do it on their own at different times. It's not so much scheduling involved. Okay, those are all great ideas. So then I just wanted to share with you some ideas in terms of priorities for each of the aims, sort of what we should be focusing on over the next year. So for aim 1, as you saw, there are a number of cross-sectional papers, and they're moving through, which is great. So I think really trying to energize those papers to sort of finish them up. And, as we've discovered, as we do these analyses, sometimes we realize that the focus needs to change or that they need to be combined or whatever. But I think, you know, moving those through is important because they will inform future work. They will inform some of the longitudinal questions potentially too, based on what we find. So it is important to move those along. And perhaps, I don't know, perhaps this is something maybe the executive committee can do, is sort of take a look at where we are and reassess. We did a prioritization of those papers at one point, at the cross-sectional papers. Maybe it's time to take a look at that again. And see, you know, which ones are the, you know, are the ones that are the highest priority there, and see if we can sort of give another boost to that process. And then I think, you know, within the cross-sectional analyses, if there are interesting new things that we can do, and I noted one, this lifespan variability idea that Philip raised, you know, there might be some interesting things that can be added that can be done, you know, that are perhaps a little more novel and can be done with the cross-sectional data that we have. And then I think another priority for this year is to really identify, you know, we have put a lot of work into creating these L3, you know, identifying the L3s and creating the L3 social environment measures. And I know the Built Environment Corps is thinking very actively about what L3 built environment measures make sense. And there's at least one proposal. Josiah has a proposal looking at the relationship between built environment and social environment features and air pollution levels for L3s, for example. So I think, you know, prioritizing those so that's not, you know, an extraordinary amount of work creating every single measure for everything, but rather focusing in on the, you know, the papers that we know are already planned. And I know we have a meeting, this is already in process, because we do have a meeting of the data and methods, the social environment and the Built Environment Corps to discuss this particular issue. And there are issues about the sizes of the L3s, et cetera, that we'll be talking about. And so perhaps as part of that, we need to sort of prioritize L3 analyses. I also wanted to mention that the small area analyses of mortality with the cities for which we have geocoded mortality are well underway right now with the city of Buenos Aires, but will be, you know, possible in other cities as well. So that's a parallel process. A group has been meeting about this, you know, quite actively. So, and then, so this is the longitudinal piece is something that we talked a lot about at this meeting in particular. And this has, I know that this is a recurring issue that we've been talking about at several of our meetings, but I think we are getting to the point where we're really ready to start to, you know, prioritize these things. And so I think, you know, I think we need to develop a process for, you know, how to prioritize feasible and informative longitudinal analyses. And I emphasize feasible because, as you know, as many have said, we can't go and calculate everything for every time point. So I think we have to be a little bit driven by substantive questions and feasibility. And I think we made progress in our conversations this meeting. A number of substantive questions and analytical approaches were proposed. And Daniel, for example, had proposed a nice typology of analytical approaches for longitudinal data. And so I think, you know, we should develop a strategy for prioritizing and preparing longitudinal data. And, you know, for example, survey and mortality data, 2 time points minimum. I mean, for mortality, that's not an issue because we have a lot more, but maybe for more complicated things that need to be done, you know, we don't want to do it for every single year. For surveys, I know, as Carrie said earlier, we have been looking into which countries have comparable 2 surveys that could be used. You know, and that would mean also thinking about social environment data, you know, in what cases is it feasible and practical to get another census? And that doesn't mean repeating every single measure that we did for the cross-sectional. That was so much work, right? But if we learn from the cross-sectional analyses what variables function the best, then we can just focus on those for time-varying measures, perhaps. And certainly not at the L3 level for time varying, at the L2 level and aggregates of L2s that would be L1AD. And this will, of course, involve finally grappling with this issue that we've been talking about in terms of, you know, harmonizing the spatial units over time. And similarly with the built environment data, I think Daniel proposed some key areas that it seemed like, you know, these are feasible to get, you know, have 2 measures on for at least over a given time period. And I think there could be some very interesting questions. So I think that's another, you know, if we do this in a focused way, I think it's, and really keeping our eye on what are the papers that we want to write with this. I think I think it will be important. We've already seen, you know, we haven't done very many longitudinal analyses yet, but Anna has her paper on PM and infant mortality, which has some interesting results. Nelson, I know, is working as well on PM analyses and all-cause mortality or life expectancy. So there's potential there. So I think that's what I had for AIM-1. Let me see, yeah, nothing else. I'll just stop there and see if anyone has any comments or other ideas or modifications or questions.
There was one of the typologies that Daniel presented, which was baseline and then, so that we don't need really 2 time points for the exposure.
Right.
That's for the outcome, which for mortality we already have.
That's true. Yeah.
The only thing we need is some confidence on the longitudinal crosswalk. Like say, yes, we can do this. But other than that, that's something we can already do. And actually, Kevin, in one of his analyses, is looking at longitudinal trends.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. For that aspect, we do not need. We could use a single social environment or built environment time point.
And I don't know if you will mention this in name 2, but policies, you know, you put them in a time, once you know that they were enacted in a given time point, that's longitudinal, right? They were not existing before and then they are existing after. So that's another one where we don't really need anything else other just knowing the policy, which is a tricky thing in itself.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge there is if you have to adjust for something else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we saw this, I mean, in the grant that Anna just submitted, you know, looking at maternal and paternal leave policies, but the question arises, well, what else changed? And so, but yeah, in principle, it might not be necessary.
Yeah, as long as we have controls, which is what we are doing in Leon, where we are not adjusting for any time varying thing other than the denominator. So,
right. Yeah. Any other questions on this?
And if I could add one more thing, that so in surveys, even when I'm still skeptical with the survey thing, but there's one thing we can do, which is see changes in inequities, right, over time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the paper by Monica, but over time, where instead of being by country, it is in the same country, but over time, which is essentially the same challenge. And that's something, as long as we look at associations within the same survey, there is no need for weights or for any of those things, right? Mm-hmm. So we can actually see if, and I think this is one paper that, maybe the paper by Santiago, that is looking at several.
Yes,
that's a good example
doing
of that.
With Argentina. Yeah, it might be nice for Santiago. Maybe you could present at some meeting that, because that would be applicable. Well, we would need to have 2 surveys at least, right, for some of the other countries, but that is an important health equity question that could be addressed. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Other thoughts?
I have a question directly to Usama. Usama, you made an oblique mention to your concerns about the survey data. Do you want to elaborate on that for everyone? I think it'd be helpful to hear it.
Yeah. So my concern is that, you know, in mortality, we have the mortality in 2010, the mortality in 2011 of Mexico City, and that's, that's Mexico City. That mortality refers to Mexico City in itself. Now, if you have a survey in 2 different years, and that survey is not representative, you cannot really say that that's Mexico City, that's a change in the prevalence of diabetes in Mexico City. You can say that the associations you observe within the survey are comparable, but not the results of the survey, unless the survey is representative. And that's the tricky thing for comparisons over time, is that thing. Now, if we get prevalence estimates that we believe are somehow representative through whatever method is used, then that's fine. But think of the prevalence estimates Kerry was talking about yesterday as mortality rates. It's kind of the same idea. It's a rate for the city.
It's more associations that can be done.
Yeah, exactly.
With the survey data, I think, and the benefit of multi-level.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
that's why the idea
really
with
individual level analyses, right? It's sort of associations between variables. As you were saying, the inequity question, whether associations between certain city characteristics and individual level outcomes change over time, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so there's more to think about here in terms of longitudinal questions with the survey data, I think. And perhaps, Mariana, that might be something that the survey working group can start thinking about. I know we have plenty to do right now with the papers, but maybe at some point it could be something that, we could think about there.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Usama that it's going to be a challenge in how much we can actually say with it.
But we're used to this, right? We're all about making the impossible possible, aren't we? Right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
So if I come up with the way to do it, do I get the prize next year?
Well, there's still competition for this prize, but maybe. All right, anything else? This is a very good conversation. Any other ideas or questions? Okay, so for aim 2, obviously advancing the policy evaluation studies, we already talked about those. Those are, underway with some modified plans. And the ones that are not doing primary data collection, hopefully can continue to move forward over the course of this year. It would be nice to potentially get some papers out of those. And then, another thing that came up, I think, in the meeting quite a bit today is how can we leverage the data for aim 1 and make it more policy relevant, right? And I think we're, and I just jotted down some ideas that came up over the course of the meeting. Of course, the high, priority of the COVID situation, are there ways we can leverage some of the things that are happening to learn about policy interventions related to COVID or others? So I think that's something to, talk more about and get more specific about. I think, yeah, and this is the second point, was similar to that. What I think it was Rodrigo was saying about the bike lanes, and we're doing a little bit of that because Ecobici has actually pivoted to evaluate some bike lanes, new bike lanes in Mexico City, but there may be ways in which we can leverage other data for that. And I think here, the training and the methodologies, the synthetic control method or some of the other approaches might help spur some of that thinking. I think this is another area where, we can at least do some thinking and perhaps identify some options. It's hard, it's easier said than done, but it's something to think about. I don't know if there's anything else.
Anna?
Yeah.
in that sense, there's, because for the policy evaluation, the first thing that comes to my mind at least is time trends, right? But then we have cities across countries. So we have cities where policies have been implemented and cities where they haven't. And that was, there were quite a few ideas in that sense yesterday. I remember particularly Nancy Lopez mentioning some ideas of policies and comparability across countries. So that's really a very interesting way to make it policy relevant, I think. And there's a work by an Argentinian or Uruguayan researcher in Costa Rica. I can't remember her name right now, but she has built a typology of estados de bienestar, welfare states in Latin America. Mm-hmm. There might be something like that linked to urban development policy or urban planning or something very urban that maybe we could also use at some point to make use of AIM-1 kind of data and compare policies in a more macro sense, no? I'm obsessed with issues like la política del precio suelo, how that leads to segregation, inequality. Maybe we could, at some point, I hope we had like 7 more years to go, but anyway, have some sort of typology. I think I've seen city typologies in terms of government, but I'm not sure now. But
yeah. Okay, so that's something, to think about. I mean, the tricky thing here is identifying the specific policy. Is there enough variability, et cetera, et cetera? Mm-hmm. And then do we have the data, the outcome data that would be most affected by it within the time frame? So, but, I think there are lots of possibilities. I think I agree. Nancy had some very specific ideas that might be practical, and maybe we can figure out a way to move this forward. AIM-3, we didn't talk much about AIM-3, but I did want to keep it on our radar screen because a lot of work is still ongoing there. Finishing up and completing the papers related to group modeling. There's the Lidia's Brazil paper and the CIB Ivana's cross-impact balance paper that some of you are involved with. That's almost about to be submitted, so that will be submitted soon, I think. And then both Ivana and Brent have been working hard on these 2 ABM papers. Initial model papers, which is pretty abstract models, but still very, interesting. And I know the systems group meeting has a meeting tomorrow to really discuss next steps. And I think that may involve building on the existing models, integrating them. I think there might be an opportunity for us in the future, potentially, to build on some of the COVID models and add some of the urban stuff to those models. We're not an infectious disease modeling group, but there may be ways that we can work with others who have developed these models. Ross, of course, is one key person here. And of course, the Colombia team has their work as well. And they're also going to talk about whether, this could be another opportunity for sort of policymaker engagement. We had these initial workshops, and we sort of left open the possibility of returning to them, if we are able to do things in person, because I don't know that virtually this would work, or maybe it would, but there's that possibility. I'm not exactly sure what that would be, but at one point there was the thought that there might be a way to share some modeling results with stakeholders and get some input and reactions into that might be useful for policy dissemination and also to improve the models themselves. I don't know if anyone has any.
I had something on AIM-2.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on the, because I think the key advantage that we have as a project is that we have a ton of units of analysis.
Yeah.
That projects that deal with countries do not have that. So I think if we could have, one of the trainings, not necessarily on the methodologies, on synthetic control, all of these things, but rather on the, how do you think about policy evaluation? Like, I know because my aunt lives here that 5 years ago they did this interesting policy, right? But then how do I go from there? What do I need to think about? Do I need to think about where do I get data from other cities, whether they have the policy or not? How do I get a clean identification of the policy? Like those steps, it would be great to have some
more sort of basic design kind of issues. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great point, because that may help us identify good opportunities. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we have the data. We have the data longitudinally, and that's the easy part, I think. The hard part is the first one.
Yeah. And we do have some examples. We can talk about the Bloomberg project. We can talk about Anna's proposal, you know, of ways that we've started to do some of that. I'm sorry, go ahead. Someone wanted to speak.
Yeah, sorry, Anna, it's I also wanted to add on AIM2. We've been working with Nelson, Lucas, and Katie on the CDP data. And we're having a working group tomorrow afternoon that's going to be talking about climate change and urban health. And I know many of you have signed, and we're very excited about it. But it's also, that could be also a great opportunity to look more at the policy aspect, since we'll be looking at adaptation and hazards in Latin American cities. And some of us in the park and the health working group have been also trying to see if we can develop a project related to the closing of public space during the COVID, and how, what were the motivation, the policy motivations behind also. So these are some ongoing conversation. I just thought that I wanted to raise them here if anyone has any ideas, and also I'll be happy to hear some of the ideas tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, that paper is looking using CDP data, C40 or CDP? CDP.
CDP, the
CDP data to examine the relationship between some of our city characteristics and the extent to which cities report certain climate hazards and adaptation, what they've done in response to it. So I think it'll be interesting as well. Okay, anything else on AIM 2 and 3 or 3?
I have a comment. I have seen recently that with this pandemic, a lot of cities has been changing, like the thing that how they move. Like, for example, there are new bike lanes, like emerging bike lanes, and all of things that they are not like, it's a response for the infectious disease, but it's part of the city change, and how they are like putting these temporary bike lanes, and they are banning cars, and they are like all of these effect on public transportation. So I think that maybe that will be worth to evaluate as part of the end of the issue, because they are policies, like how the cities are changing given the pandemic.
Yes, absolutely. That's certainly something that to think about. That's a good point. The bike lanes is one example. Josiah has also characterized reductions in air pollution as a result of some of the reductions in traffic. So I think that the key thing there is getting the data to be able to know when and what a city did. And so that then we can relate it to the outcomes. But that's, you know, definitely a great area for us to think about.
For example, I have been working with a group of architects in Guatemala that they are like activists for this, and they are planning to measure this in the future, because they are working with mayors of the cities, like a few municipalities, not the main city, because that's more difficult to change, but a little small cities in Guatemala. So it's not like part of the satellite one in Guatemala, but it's part of the country in small rural areas, where it's more easy to implement these kind of bike lanes.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully I will get some data for that.
Okay, well, maybe we can figure out a way to hear more about that.
Can I just make one comment on AM3, Anna?
Yeah, go ahead, Brent.
So I think an interesting thing about AM3 and the models specifically, actually the group model building too, is that we did a lot of this work before we had this awesome data infrastructure, and before, when a lot of the project was sort of abstract about what policies we were going to be able to evaluate and things like that. So I think now that we're a little past midpoint, it might be a good idea to sort of reflect back on what we can do in the next year or two that would leverage the data infrastructure, that would maybe use models, or the models that we have, or slightly modified versions to sort of address tangential questions that the rest of the team is trying to address, and sort of talk about that integration side. And there's like 20 people signed up for the
wow, okay.
so I think it'll be a good conversation, a good forum for that.
Okay, great. That's great, Brent. Sounds like a great idea. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. So those are the sort of the three more researchy aims. Then of course we have our fourth aim, dissemination and policy translation. We already talked a little bit about this, so I won't dwell on it. You know, we'll continue the webinar series. We're going to do these locally focused webinars over the next year, do the dissemination of findings. You know, a few questions are, you know, should we be thinking about other ways in this remote world that we can get input from policy or the policy community on questions or policy evaluation opportunities? I think this was raised by someone who spoke, and I just thought it was an interesting idea to think about. And then should we tentatively plan for some in-person dissemination, you know, start to plan that? Again, maybe it's a little bit too soon, but I think we probably should start thinking about that. And I think as part of our dissemination efforts, you know, I think thinking strategically about outreach to people who may fund us in the future is increasingly important over time. And so, you know, this is part of dissemination. So, you know, we are not sure if the Wellcome Trust is going to continue to fund us. So I think we should think about, we need to start thinking about other foundations, other groups. You know, I mentioned to you, I had this meeting with NIMHD. And so, you know, okay, would they be interested in any of this? So I think that's another important piece of our dissemination that we have to keep in mind as well.
I would like to make a comment on that because this is something we have been discussed a lot among the MAPECA group, the maternal and child group, because we think we have a lot of data and a lot of potential to bring you know, lot of evidence for translations in actions for child equity. And so, but we face with the thing that maybe this is something we never thought as a group, and maybe we will need, or I don't know if that could make something that it could be possible as a support of what kind of resources, of what kind of, lo voy a decir en castellano, si estamos pensando en cuestiones de funders como individuos o como grupos, porque creo que eso también marca un poco la diferencia. Creo que cuando uno lo hace como grupo, como Salurbal, como es un grupo, tiene mucho más peso y puede a lo mejor apuntar a cosas más grandes. Pero también a veces, o sea, por ejemplo, vemos que, por ejemplo, hay grupos aquí que dentro de Salurbal que podrían como grupo obtener un propio grant. Pero bueno, claro, también se necesitaría a lo mejor un apoyo, no sé si existe esa posibilidad de tener alguna idea de pensar o de refinar o de ver cómo se apuntan los grupos para poder lograr algo así, ¿no? O si eso es parte también de algo que le interese a Salurbal para conservar la integridad.
So I don't know if I should respond in Spanish or in English, but so maybe I'll start in English and then I can translate. So I think, so I think there are opportunities for us to apply for funding. You know, as opportunities arise, we have done this, right? Through our ancillary study mechanism. That's why we have that ancillary study mechanism. And so, you know, we can be opportunistic and apply, you know, for things that as they come up. However, you know, we have a big infrastructure here that is supporting the project. And so I think we also have to think about how to support that infrastructure, because that is what allows all these other studies to happen without having to pay for all the other stuff that's going on, right? So I think we have to do both. I think that if there are opportunities for us to apply for pieces, we should definitely do that using our ancillary studies mechanism. But at the same time, and this is what, you know, I'm always thinking about now is, you know, how are we going to get money to continue? So, and, you know, I think we will, because it's a good project and it's exciting and it's a novel, but that's something that, you know, we'll have to continue to think about and strategically. So I don't know if this answers your question, Ana, but hay que hacer las dos cosas, o sea, buscar financiamiento oportunista para porciones de cosas, pero al mismo tiempo buscar financiamiento para la estructura, digamos, básica del estudio que implica lo de los datos, mantener los datos, hacer las reuniones, la coordinación, etcétera, etcétera, para que sean factibles todos los otros trocitos, ¿no?
Claro, lo que entiendo es que cómo se moviliza eso es mucho más no, la pregunta sería cómo hacemos los que estamos en Salud Rural para colaborar con eso.
Bueno, como cuando se vean oportunidades de financiamiento, digamos, díganos, yeah, so make us, if we miss opportunities, make us aware, and then together we will, also look for the bigger picture things. And, we are, Claire and I and others are actively thinking about this, so.
Yeah, and if anyone sees any opportunities come up that you think might be relevant, just email them to me because I try to keep track of those things.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's just something for us to think about. I think, we still have a way, we still have time, but we should start thinking about that. And it may be different groups funding different pieces too. Okay, so, and something we have to start to do, we have some time, but we do have a commitment to do a public data release of some data. And so at some point we have to start thinking about that. I think we have a little bit of time, but we're starting to get a lot of questions about that. So it's something that we have to start thinking about. A few more things to keep on our radar screen. And I know that we're a little bit behind on time now. Two areas that I think are important and also are of interest to our funder right now, which is climate change, building on the heat study, of course, that Daniel is leading, all of the stuff that Irina was talking about, and then, of course, the infectious disease angle, another area that Wellcome Trust is also interested in, and of course, tied to COVID. And so, how can we leverage that? I mean, these are just things to, that we have to keep thinking about. And we have a working group on COVID. We have some papers underway. Is there a modeling angle? Are there some grants here, proposals? So that's something, also to think about. And so, we will come back to these more big picture topics because these have to do with the next phase of the study in some ways, I think. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or questions on that. Okay. So now more than ever, stay engaged. This is, I think it's amazing that we had, 100 people from all over the region joining in to this meeting, and more, we have new people every time, which I think is wonderful. I think, capitalizing and building on all the work we've already done is what we're doing right now. And I think we have to continue to push that, this incredible resource that we have. I also wanted to mention that, the pandemic and all the social justice and anti-racism movements also create opportunities for us. So I think we should also think about how our project interfaces with this. We talked a little bit about the health equity stuff. We have some work going on in the area of racial inequities. Not a lot because we don't have a lot of data in our region, unfortunately, by race. But I think this, I don't know, I just wanted to put this out there because it is so much part of our lives that we must figure out a way for our study to be engaged with these issues even more. And then hang in there. I remember when I was a pediatrician, I don't know if I already told you this story, but when I was learning how to draw blood, I remember I was reciente de primer año, there was a mother who had a little baby. The baby was like 8 months old, but the baby had one tooth. So the mother called the baby Dientito. And as I was getting close to the baby with my syringe, shaking, the mother would say, "Aguanta, Dientito, aguanta." So aguanta, that's what we have to do, right? Hang on, don't give up, resist, because we will be in person again. So, we just have to kind of get through this. So that was my symbol of resistencia, aguanta dientito. It was a very cute baby. Un dientito tenía aquí abajo. I think he did okay. I don't remember. I think he had pneumonia, but I think he was fine. So, we have more tomorrow, so it's not over yet. We have the working groups, just as a reminder, and we will be putting together, a summary of these very rich discussions that we had over the course of these 2 days and tomorrow. So as always, Claire will be putting together this fantastic report that she does. There are these 2-page summaries of the findings and the publications that go with each of the panels. And I encourage you to check them out because they were very interesting to me because it's a way to integrate some of the information and see it all together. So I encourage you to take a look at those. We'll also be getting summaries from the working groups. And then we'll be, sort of collating some action items and priorities and asking each core and working group to develop sort of priorities for the next year as a way to sort of guide our work, perhaps integrating some of the things that we talked about. And now I want to transition to the award, but before that, is there anything else that anyone wants to say or ask or add? Anything important that I missed in sort of summarizing some of the things that await us? Okay, so anyone? All right, sounds like. So we are at the Making the Impossible Possible Award. And Claire, do we have the drum roll or no? Claire, no drum roll? Okay. So this year, because this year's winner, it was, because it was impossible to choose a winner because we had such great nominations, we are making the impossible possible, and we have winners this year. We have several winners. So our first winner for Making the Impossible Possible is Jenny-Say Ramirez from INSP. Jenny-Say, ¿estás aquí? Jenny? Así, ahí está. A ver, saludar. Decí unas palabras.
Can you hear me? Sorry. What is it?
So this is for Jenny's contributions to Saludval by leading 2 manuscripts related to her dissertation and her excellent work on Saludval's food environment data and also the Bloomberg project. So some applause for Jenny. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I didn't expect that. Well, I'm still working on it. I hope that I could finish my project soon. But thank you all.
All right. Our second winner is Camila. Camila Vaz for her many contributions as a trainee and now postdoc to many Saludval papers, including analyses of a variety of data sets, CAF, Saludval harmonized survey data, and maternal mortality. Is Camila with us?
Yes, Ana.
Okay.
Thank you. I didn't expect that too.
Congratulations, Camila.
Great.
You will all be
Thank
getting
you.
some diplomas that we put together.
And
Certificate.
Camila is going to have a baby soon.
A baby. Okay. All right.
Ahí está, el baby trajo un premio también.
That's a bigger
Los niños
diploma.
vienen con un pan bajo el brazo, vienen con un Saludval.
Yeah.
Our third winner is Marianela Castillo for
Wow.
her contributions to the compilation of many data sets related to economic factors and education, among others, and her leadership of some survey analyses. Marianela?
Oh, thank you very much.
Felicidades.
Surprise.
Congratulations.
Yeah, gracias.
And our next winner is Monica Mazariegos for her outstanding work to obtain the mortality addresses for Costa Rica, a process that involved the Ministry of Health, the National Institute of Statistics, and even the election court of Costa Rica. So, and also her work leading a very thoughtful paper on social inequities in obesity. Is Monica with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. Thank you to all. It's great to
Congratulations.
team. I'm so excited. Thanks.
And last but not least, our next win. Oh no, sorry, I'm not done. Our next winner is Yang Ju. I'm not sure if I pronounced your last name right, Yang, for being instrumental in developing many environmental measures that we're using: green space, elevation, imputing heat data, developing a plan for longitudinal measure of the urban footprints, and calculating water metrics. And on top of that, leading 3 papers. So a lot of work. Is Yang with us?
Yes, thanks. Well, I'm so honored to receive this, and this is really a great reward. Also, hoping to do more in the future.
Thank you, congratulations. And I think this is the last one now, last but not least, Ana Ortigosa, for contributing to the very beginning of Salurbal surveys and many tables. Remember, Ana, completing 3 papers and more on the way, and leading many initiatives, MAPECA, Social Environment Core, among others, co-leading that and contributing to many briefs and webinars and much more. So congratulations, Ana.
Thank you. I would like to share this with
Ana.
Usama. Because all of these things are also in parallel done by Usama. So I will share my recognition with my other half.
Okay, so I think that's the end. Congratulations to all our winners. Maybe we should, I don't know if there's a way we can get a photo of you, of all of you together. That would be nice.